Too Late for Tears from 1949 was an excellent crime film of the lure of free money that drives a woman to murder. This is a great crime film, and I've enjoyed a lot of other films with Lizabeth Scott and Duryea, so I was really looking forward to seeing them in this particular film. Thanks to my friend Florida Greg for the suggestion, and thanks to everybody who leaves suggestions in the comments of other films. I do try to get to all of them, but funny thing is, the more films I watch and review, the more good ones I discover that I still need to go and watch. It's a never-ending quest. But thanks for the suggestions. Please keep them coming. Anyhow, I'll talk about this great film, and then I'll offer some closing thoughts.
She's going to trip us up, Danny. I know it.
Maybe it's time to clear out. Chalk it up to experience.
We can't. We've got to stay here until we find that ticket.
You mean stay here till she tells her story to the cops? Is that it?
She's not going to tell her story. You're going to help me again, Danny.
So the film opens up. We got a car driving along a winding mountain road at night, and we see the character Jane, played by actress Lizabeth Scott. I actually caught her not long ago in the film The Strange Love of Martha Ivers in 1946. And she's riding with Alan, her husband, played by Arthur Kennedy. I actually caught him not long ago in the film Murder, She Said. And we're not really sure what's going on at this point, but they're just driving along, and she asks him nicely if they can just go back home, because she doesn't want to go to this party because she's looked down on by one of the ladies there. So they turn around, but then things take a weird turn, as a passing car just randomly tosses a bag into their car. They take a look at the bag and determine it's some money in it. Now, in the city, they happen to get pulled over by a motorcycle cop in pursuit. So, what's going to happen? But don't worry, it's just a fake out in order to give him a ticket. So they do manage to get back home. Jane dumps out all the money, all this wealth and fortune in her eyes. But Alan, he's a little more pragmatic here, and he says that they need to return this money. Their neighbor Kathy shows up for a visit. She's played here by Christine Miller. Alan is her brother, and he seems distressed about what to do with this money, and he tells her to come back later. He's got like a headache, so she leaves. They don't let her in on their little discovery. Now, Jane and Alan decide to hide away the money for now, so they go take it to a lockbox at a train station, and all seems to be well for now. So the next day, the character Danny shows up. He's played by Duryea. Great actor. I've seen him in other films like The Great Flammarion, and he wants to speak to Alan. He insists that he should come in and look around. He's kind of pretending to be a detective or something. And, well, Jane reluctantly agrees. Now, he finds a mink coat that she's purchased recently. Now he's getting suspicious, demanding to know, where's the dough? And it's here that we get to that infamous slap scene that you see on the movie poster. Shame on you, Duryea.
Where's the dough?
Those things in the kitchen happen to belong to my sister-in-law. And I let you in because, well, housewives can get awfully bored sometimes. But believe me, I've no idea what you're talking about.
You're too smooth, honey. You're much too smooth. Where's the dough? Where's that money? What did you do with it?
We sent it to the police.
You're a liar. You would have told me that before now.
I was afraid to.
You should be. It was mine.
So we find out that this was his money and he wants it back. And she says that they'll get it for him. So he leaves. Well, the next day, the Danny character shows up again. He still wants his money. At this point, he just lets himself in and basically annoys Jane. Now, he wants his money and he wants it bad. Now, she wants it too. So she kind of gives in and gives this guy a kiss. Uh-oh. So we see she's willing to do about anything to get this money. It's really starting to get to her. So at the door, he kind of gives her a little face push, to remind her that she's in a tough racket now. Oh, Jane, what have you gotten yourself into? Well, anyhow, they're going to meet later regarding this money. So Alan and Jane, they go out on this date, and they're leaving a restaurant to go for a nice little boat ride. She seems to be kind of upset, and he asks what's wrong. But we know she's up to some shenanigans behind his back. So he reaches into her bag for some cigarettes and discovers the gun. And she tries to grab it back from him, and, well, you know how it goes in films like this.
Did you
hear something then?
Uh-uh. Stop hearing things and kiss me.
So she brings the boat over to meet with Danny, and he sees that her husband is there, he's dead, and then she draws a gun on him. She plans to leave Alan's body weighted down in the water, and that Danny will leave on the boat with her wearing her husband's hat and coat, to avoid suspicion. So at this point, we can see that her character is committed to this crime. She really wants the money and has turned pretty cold, it would seem. So she leaves to go back to her place, and there she talks to Pete, who works there to establish an alibi, I guess. Pete, by the way, is played by actor Smokey Whitfield, who's been in some of those Bomba the Jungle Boy films, the ones that Johnny Sheffield did after Tarzan. I really need to review some of those, and I'm sorry, I'm really rabbit trailing here, sorry. So she goes back to her room, she has a drink with Kathy as they wait for Alan to get home. Oh, that's cold, Jane. Well, as the night gets late, she seems more alarmed and decides to call the police. And when the police say that she can file a report the next day, she talks to Kathy and she starts making up some story about Alan cheating on her. Now, Kathy seems dubious at this point. I think she's starting to sense that something fishy is going on. So later that night, Jane is out cruising with Danny, and she's just driving like a lunatic. And he's really not convinced that the money is buried somewhere like she says, and he just wants out of the car. He's leaving. But the ticket to the locker where they left the money, it's still apparently in the coat that he is wearing. So anyhow, Jane leaves a car parked at the beach with the keys still in it, to kind of make it look as though maybe Alan took the car and left for Mexico. So while she's walking off on the beach, some ne'er-do-wells come along and steal the car.
Nobody here.
Yeah, keys in it too.
Your feet hurt?
You kidding?
What are we waiting for?
So Jane makes her way over to Danny's shabby apartment. She's demanding to see Alan's coat, looking for that ticket to get the money. And he's suspicious of why she wants it so much. And he's checking into the pockets, looking, and he's just not able to find it. And she passes out. Now, Kathy, meanwhile, goes snooping around Jane's apartment, and she finds the actual slip there in one of her drawers. Now, at this point in the film, the character Don Blake arrives. He's played by easygoing actor Dan DeFore, and he's just there to visit on his old friend Alan. But at this point, Kathy confides in him that something weird is going on, and she's a little suspicious of Jane. Now, Don seems eager to help, which is pretty cool, probably not least of which I figure is because actress Christine Miller is a cutie pie. Anyhow, back to Danny's. Jane is trying to figure out how to make the pickup of this money at the locker without the ticket. And she's feeling really cold at this point. And Danny says he'll heat up the place by lighting the oven. I'm no expert on gas ovens, but I'm pretty sure you don't just light a gas oven and leave the door open because of the carbon monoxide released into the air, right? But whatever. Jane wants her gun back, and Danny, completely distrusting of her, knows that she just wants to get it so she can shoot him when she gets the chance. So we kind of established the two of these don't really trust one another. But all the same, the scene still ends with some sugar between the two of them. Ah, the poor sap.
I think probably someday you will kill me. And I wouldn't want that to happen unless we were good friends. Go ahead, scream. Get the cops in here. That's all we need.
So back at her apartment, Jane talks with Kathy about Alan's disappearance when the character Lieutenant Breach of Homicide Division arrives. He's played here by actor Barry Kelly. Caught him not long ago in the film The Asphalt Jungle. Now he's there to investigate. But Jane kind of plays along with her story that she's making up, that there was an affair going on with Alan and another mysterious woman. So the lieutenant gets a call that, sure enough, a car was found, abandoned near the Mexican border. So far things are kind of playing along with Jane's silly alibi here. So this lieutenant leaves, and we see that Kathy is growing even more suspicious, and she leaves as well. So Jane invites Don in for a drink and gets friendly with him. He seems to be going along with the story so far, but he did notice a guy out in the hall in a plaid suit, and Jane is alarmed to hear about this. And sure enough, when he leaves, Danny comes in. Now, Jane is up to some sneaky scheme to get rid of Kathy, possibly using poison. Well, Kathy and Don, they go out and they do some detective work, and they revisit the restaurant that Jane and Alan had been out, and they look at the boats where they had gone for the ride. Don questions this gondolier character if he had seen them before, and sure enough, he had. So they're trying to put this mystery together, piece by piece. Now, the next day, Danny shows up to see Jane, and he's clearly drunk, and it would seem his character is really starting to fall apart here. But he picked up the poison for Jane's scheme. So Don shows up to see Kathy and asks her out for dinner. She says she wants to take the ticket to the station to see what is in this locker. Now they leave, but before they can go, Jane stops them at the door. Now she really wants Don to meet with her friend, this character named Jack, played by actor David Clark. And he agrees. But when they meet, we see that it was a setup. Apparently, this character was in the military previously. He had been stationed at Ipswich Station, and he was there with Alan, but he has no idea who this character Don is. Uh-oh. So Don's ready to leave, but Kathy kind of has lost her trust in him and says that he should just go on, and she wants her ticket back. Ah, now Jane overhears this, and her trap worked. So this Jack guy leaves, and Jane draws a gun on them, demanding the ticket. So while Jane checks Don's pockets, Kathy manages to run off and calls the police. Now when she returns, she finds that Jane is gone, but there's poor Don on the ground. Is he dead? Well, she calls for a doctor and also calls the police at Union Station to give them a heads up to watch out for a woman who's going to be there to make a pickup. So Jane goes to get the money, but suspecting the police might be there to watch, she pays some random guy $5 to go get the money from the locker for her. She knows they're after her. And by the way, I really love the quick thinking of this character throughout the film. It did remind me a lot of The Fugitive. I'll get to this a little bit later. So Kathy helps Don recover. Seems he was clubbed on the head, but he's doing better. People get hit on the heads in films all the time, and they recover pretty quickly. Jane, meanwhile, gets back to Danny. And he is basically turned into a total drunken slob at this point of the film. So she needs his help to get out of the country, and she can't leave alone, too suspicious. So they look at the money, and Danny gives a story about how the money is all unmarked. And well, Jane says they should have a toast to celebrate. Oh, sneaky lady.
Here's to crime. It pays. And pays.
So Don talks with the lieutenant, and he wants to have this search of all of the water done to look for Alan's body. But the lieutenant eventually agrees to it, but gives him a hard time about it because it's going to be really expensive and doesn't expect to find anything. Now Jane, meanwhile, hides away the money in her car and makes off for Mexico. Mexico in the 1940s was where there was always music playing, and it's basically a big holiday country. But will she get away? Will Don and Kathy be able to catch up with this sneaky lady? Well, with only a few minutes left of the film, I'll let you catch the exciting conclusion for yourself. No spoilers here. Too Late for Tears was produced by United Artists and was directed by Byron Haskin. And I do enjoy the film that features that crafty femme fatale, and Lizabeth Scott was perfectly cast here. She's got that husky Lauren Bacall voice, and is just very convincing as that murderous lady, willing to do anything that gets in the way of her money. Now, Dan Duryea, is a sleazy accomplice, really worked well here. You really grow to dislike him more and more when he keeps showing up. He's like this slimeball character that keeps bothering her. And he does seem to get progressively slimier as the film goes on. You know, drunken, haggard, and I'll be honest, I was actually kind of glad when his character was killed off. Now, don't misunderstand. He's a great actor here. And I love how he plays the creep. And at first, you know, he's like this cocky criminal. He's thinking that, yeah, he can play this woman, whatever. But, oh man, he starts to realize she's not someone to be trifled with. You know, her lust for this money drives her to manipulate everyone, including him. And it's just great. I love watching how that unfolds in this film. Aspects of this film really reminded me of the film Double Indemnity with Barbara Stanwyck and Fred MacMurray. It's another film with an amazing femme fatale character. But with this film here, you get the feeling that Lizabeth Scott's character is completely driven by money, just for herself. She doesn't really care about romance or relationships. She just wants her loot all to herself, and she wants to get away with it. And she doesn't mind killing anyone in her way. And you know, there were brief windows of romance with her character, with Dan Duryea, but ultimately we see she was just playing the guy. And we can figure out she's going to kill him whenever she gets a chance. Don DeFore did a convincing job as a character of Don, who just seems to kind of stumble into this film initially and then gets involved into the mystery, maybe a little too aggressively at first, but as the details start to unfold and you understand why he's here, it starts to make a lot more sense. And his relationship with Christine Miller's character was sweet, if brief, in the film. The film was written by Roy Huggins, whose other claim to fame would be that he created shows like The Fugitive, Maverick, and The Rockford Files. You know, legendary shows like that. And interesting, he was also a mentor to Stephen J. Cannell, who was a creator of many of the hits of the 80s era, such as The A-Team and The Greatest American Hero. You know, stuff I grew up with. He's also listed as one of the executive producers of The Fugitive from 1993 with Harrison Ford, which is one of my all-time favorite films. I love films with the man-on-the-run formula and that more modern retelling of the Fugitive story. Man, I've watched that so many times, and I really should do a review on this channel. Although it's not necessarily an old film, I guess 93, 30 years ago, maybe it is. I don't know. But I love that film, the way Ford's character finds clever ways to avoid escape, you know, changing his appearance and using his wits and so on, and plenty of fake-outs. And I love there were actually fake-outs in this film as well. Too Late for Tears was also known by the title Killer Bait, which honestly sounds a little bit better. You know, Too Late for Tears doesn't really seem to fit. I don't know, it almost sounds like a kid's shampoo. Maybe something like Too Late for These Poor Saps trying to stop Lizabeth Scott on her scheme to get money to flee to Mexico. Now, according to Wikipedia, this is in the public domain. But I'm sure YouTube will still give me a copyright claim just the same for using clips from the film. It's the price I pay to do this hobby channel, I guess. Now, apparently, from what I read in TCM, this film had been lost for a long time. And the UCLA Film Archive, they remastered this from more recently discovered original prints of the film. And it was a restoration process that took about 5 years. They even found a print in France and pieced it together with another version to complete the film. And the restored version was broadcast on TCM in 2015. So it's pretty cool to hear about restoration of old classics like this one. Now, final thought. I have to make a mention of this, but oh man, check out that movie poster. Doesn't it just make you flinch? Yeah, man, that's just to remind you, you're in a tough racket now. Or this one, too late, too late, too late. And this one made me chuckle too. Kind of looks like Elizabeth Scott, or is that Drew Barrymore? And stifling a yawn in this picture. In one terrifying moment, she realized, I love it. These are great. That's not love light. That's murder in her eyes. Anyhow, that's Too Late for Tears from 1949. I really enjoyed this one. It's a solid story with some great acting. Very amazing performance by Lizabeth Scott as a very nasty femme fatale who is seduced by the dark side. Well, seduced by the love of money and is willing to kill anybody that gets in her way. This is a great crime film. It's worth checking out.